You're listening to the Undefeated Bears podcast with Jay Clark, releasing every Monday at 9 a.m. all season long. Follow us on Twitter at Podcast Bears for the latest Undefeated Bears updates.
Welcome back to the Undefeated Bears podcast, episode 6. Thank you for all the returning listeners. Thank you for the first-time listeners. Thank you for those who will be coming. And man, what a letdown week 1 was for our Bears, man. But it's okay. Week 1, game 1, we're going to emphasize that, the guys came out flat, didn't deliver a memorable performance for us fans, but we'll get all into it, see what went wrong with the game. And we got the Broncos coming up next week. Keep it locked right here on the Undefeated Bears podcast, E6, coming your way. What a letdown. What a letdown week 1 was for our Bears, man. And all the hype, long off season, training camp, full training camp with that Khalil Mack. Opening up the NFL's 100th season against the Packers, prime time Thursday night. The stage was set. And we were let down, Bears fans will say we were let down. This is the Undefeated Bears podcast, and the Bears will not be undefeated this season. But as we say, Bears fans always remain undefeated. In a game that was a high total coming in, it turned out to be a very low-scoring, methodical defensive battle. Tough to watch for the non-diehard football fan. A very tough game to watch. Both teams did turn out looking sloppy. We don't know if it was good defensive play or just sloppy football by both sides, Sloppy football by both teams in the game Thursday night. So a high total game actually turned out to be, one of those old-fashioned, sloppy, grinded-out type football games. Aaron Rodgers put a touchdown on the board, early first half, and it looked like it may break out to be, either A, a Packers runaway or B, maybe a back and forth could potentially brew. But that ended up being the only touchdown of the game. Impressive touchdown drive by that Aaron Rodgers. Put one on the board for his team, and, our guys never seemed to materialize anything on offense in this football game, man. Our guys were very stagnant, very flat. Play calling wasn't there. There wasn't much variety in what was going on. I think Nagy was very timid in his play calling in this one, man. He tried to get cute early. It didn't end up well. Ended up in a penalty. And, from that point on, I think he was, not being himself. His thing is always be you. And I think he kind of got away from that last night with the timid play calling. Tariq Cohen, of course, had his jitter moment. Tariq had that fumble in the game. And, overall just sloppy football, man. Over 100 yards, penalties, just tough to watch Bears football this past Thursday, man. And, going forward, I see optimism. Call me crazy. I'm optimistic going forward because after that performance of what we seen, there's no way that you could possibly think that was the best football these Bears are going to play all season. They came out last year, and last year's first game loss compared to this year, it doesn't compare. We had the big lead and blew it, way more heart-wrenching than this one. This was just a frustrating one to watch because we know what our guys can do. We know what type of offense that we're capable of having, and it just wasn't there. It just wasn't there Thursday night. We got a chance coming up against, two opponents that, as far as talent on the rosters, we're much more superior than, and the Broncos and the Redskins. So we'll get into the game against Denver coming up next. This is the Undefeated Bears podcast. Keep it locked. Going into this game against the Denver Broncos, Once again, going against a couple teams and the Broncos and the Redskins back-to-back before we go visit the Vikings. And, these are two very winnable games. Two very winnable football games. First against the Broncos. This is a Vic Fangio matchup. Vic Fangio, Von Miller, Bryce Callahan's over there now. This is no cakewalk. I definitely don't want to overlook the Broncos in any way, shape, or form. But Joe Flacco is their quarterback. He hasn't exactly been lighting the league up as of late. He's just one of those quarterbacks. He is a Super Bowl champion. May we not forget, but I believe we have a chance going up against the Broncos. We should be able to frustrate their offense, suffocate their running game, take out guys such as Phillip Lindsay, Cortland Sutton. These are talented players, but I don't think they have enough on the offensive side of the ball. Very formidable on defense. With Vic Fangio out there calling plays, looking to wreak havoc. Yeah, the guys, this is no cakewalk. If our offense comes out flat again, we could be in some trouble, man. But if the offense were to come out anyway similarly as they did last week, we could be in some trouble early. Some trouble early in this one, man. No, the Broncos are not the most talented team that we will face all season, but, there's an NFL roster. They have to be taken seriously, man. So with Vic Fangio leading the charge against our Bears, definitely will be some storylines going into this one that will make for an interesting matchup. Hopefully we can take care of business. Offense can get the ball rolling. Defense is going to continue what they do. Hopefully we can get a first W of the season this year. The first step in possibly going to see Minnesota with a 2-1 record. But now we got to take care of business against a team we should beat. So we'll see how the guys shape out. Next, we'll take a look at our fantasy outlook for the offense. The Bears' offense is going to be tough in the fantasy world, man. It's such a tough offense to kind of figure out how they're going to show up in a given week, what players are going to be utilized. A lot of that has to do with Matt Nagy and his unpredictability with play calling. That's not a bad thing. Definitely not a bad thing schematically, but in the fantasy realm, it does make for some challenges. So first things first, as far as fantasy, I'm benching Mitchell Trubisky. Mitch has to go out and prove it, man. The best we've seen of Mitchell Trubisky to this day has been the 6-touchdown light-up against, at the time, historically bad Buccaneers defense. Historically bad. I'm talking terrible. So, yes, he had a heck of a game in that football matchup against the Bucs, but, from a fantasy perspective, Mitch has to prove it. Against this Broncos defense, with Vic Fangio calling plays for those guys, Von Miller coming off the edge, I'm not starting Mitch Trubisky this week, man. From a Bears fan perspective, I look at this matchup and say, it's not a high stakes game. So I'm looking at this matchup and saying, I'm hoping Mitch can learn in this game. I'm hoping Von Miller can pressure him, and I'm hoping Mitch can deliver, good throws under said pressure. You can do nothing but grow playing against a guy like Von Miller, playing against a defense coordinator like Vic Fangio. It can only help you in the long run. So I'm hoping Mitch sees this as an opportunity to make some strides and plays a good football game. But as far as fantasy, I'm not starting him. Allen Robinson has come back as a true number one receiver. Guys forget that this is a former league leader in touchdowns. Allen Robinson is no scrub. After that performance he put on, I think he's on his way to a 90 to 100 catch season. I think he's going to be mentioned with some of the best this season. Allen Robinson is going to be here. he was the lone bright spot on the offense in game one, if you ask me. Allen Robinson played a good football game. He was reliable. He had a late drop, but, for the most part, he was very reliable. Most catches, great and, racked up some yards. Played a good football game, if you ask me, Allen Robinson. Start him. Start him every week. True number one. One name I'll throw out there for daily fantasy players is Adam Shaheen. Guy's going to be cheap going into next week, and if Trey Burton's not on the field, again, if Trey Burton is not on the field, I believe Adam Shaheen may have some value. For a low-end tight end, you never want to spend too much on tight ends these days and daily. They're so interchangeable. So Adam Shaheen, as far as, daily fantasy, I'd play that. I'd take that play. Low risk, high reward potential. Tariq Cohen, I'm going to continue to say he's a play in the fantasy realm. Even in a low game, he still provided, decent fantasy value. He's going to be on the field a lot. Hopefully we see him get some more carries in his next football game, but he's going to, catch the ball. Tariq Cohen is kind of turning into a just jack-of-all-trades type of football player. I can't even call him a running back at this point. He's just an offensive weapon. So he should be all over the field. I would say continue to play Tariq Cohen. He looked a little nervous in the first game, but, Tariq Cohen's got the dog in him, man. He's going to be ready for the big moment. And as far as his defense, come on, guys. We'll say once again, these guys are ready, man. Did you see these guys? Did you see this front seven coming off the ball, getting immediate pressure, clogging up running lanes, getting after the quarterback? This defense is going to do what they do. We just need Mitch to exist, man. You can't disappear, Mitch. You just got to exist, man. And we should win some football games. This defense completely outmatched Green Bay at the line of scrimmage. They did give up a couple of big plays, but aggressive defenses, they do that. They held Aaron Rodgers to 10 points, and, Aaron Rodgers did not look like Aaron Rodgers. So this defense is going to get the nod every single week in fantasy. Maybe when we play teams such as the Chiefs and the Rams, some will back out. Say not to play these guys, but as far as fantasy, defense, the Chicago Bears are the number one answer in football. Next, we'll talk about our worst-case scenario for the Bears going up against the Broncos. Keep it locked right here on the Undefeated Bears podcast. Going up against a team like the Broncos after such a hyped-up, built-up rivalry game against Green Bay is kind of dangerous territory. How do you get hyped up for a non-conference game against a team that probably won't make the playoffs? And it's a couple games before a division rival once again against Minnesota. This could be considered a trap game. The worst case scenario in this football game, I would say, is the offense really that bad? If the offense was truly as inept as they appeared in game one, we could be in some trouble. I'll say it again. Mitchell Trubisky just has to exist. He does not have to light the world on fire. He does not have to be Patrick Mahomes. Mitch Trubisky needs to be Alex Smith. If he can do that, this Bears team should win a lot of football games, man. But, Mitch, you got to give us something. Mitch, you got to give us something, man. Something, son. We do not need a disappearing Mitchell Trubisky. We don't need a Mitchell Trubisky that looks unnatural and forcing the issue. Could we get a couple more performances like that? We don't know. We shouldn't blame it all on Mitch. We don't know if it was Mitch. We don't know if it was play calling. Hell, it looked like a little bit of everything. But pretty soon here, A couple more performances like that, the Bears brass is going to start, seriously rethinking all that they gave up to get this guy. Do I anticipate that happening? No. Mitch has been on a steady incline. He had a bad game. The offense as a whole had a bad game. We looked unprepared, unenthused. I couldn't believe it was the Chicago Bears that I was watching in that game Thursday night. A team full of energy, excitement, belief. It just looked bad, guys. So I don't anticipate seeing that again from our guys. I don't anticipate our guys coming out flatline like they did last week. But we will see, man. We will see which way this team is going to go. Are we going to retain our crown as the NFC North champions and our swagger of last season? Or are we going to tuck and roll, man? Jay Clark's final take for this week. Give Mitchell Trubisky some time. Now, Mitchell Trubisky came into a situation in Chicago where expectations were exponential. Mitchell Trubisky was a quarterback that was taken number 2 after the Bears gave up what some believed to be too much overcompensation of draft capital in order to draft this guy. I'm not one who believes that we gave up too much in the draft. I don't take the draft into consideration when evaluating Mitchell Trubisky. First of all, we recouped those picks in the same draft. If people look at the details of the trade and the following trade that happened in the same draft, we recouped the same picks, So as far as the draft, I throw that out the window, guys. Forget about the draft, where we picked him, what we gave up to get him. Forget about that. Mitchell Trubisky is our quarterback. And to this point, if we can't get him to live up to the number 2 pick, if he can't be the gunslinging superstar quarterback that a number 2 pick should be, then make him Alex Smith, man. If not Alex Smith, then Joe Flacco, Super Bowl year. These guys don't have to be world beaters to win when they have a defense such as Mitch has. You could see from the first snap of defensive football for this Bears team, they are outmatching guys at the line of scrimmage so badly. The offensive game plan goes completely out the window. Guys, Khalil Mack, Akeem Hicks coming at you full force. Bilal Nichols being disruptive in there. Eddie Goldman being disruptive. Leonard Floyd coming off the edge, had 2 sacks in the game. This defense is so ferocious. And all Mitch has to do is be average. He does not have to be great. Mitch just has to be an average NFL quarterback. Just last year, Mitchell Trubisky was no Patrick Mahomes. Mitchell Trubisky was no Ben Roethlisberger, Drew Brees, Tom Brady. As far as stats, demeanor, playmaking ability, Mitchell Trubisky was none of those guys. I'll call it how it is. But we won 12 football games because he existed. He was an NFL quarterback. That's all you got to do. And you win a lot of damn football games if you're Mitchell Trubisky. I can't say I'm off the Mitchell Trubisky bandwagon. I wouldn't even call it bandwagon. Support team. We'll call it support team. Because I do believe in Mitch. I don't think last week's game was, a rule. I definitely would call it an exception. Mitchell's going to ball, man. I don't know how he is from the neck up, but the kid is talented. The kid's definitely talented. I think he's a little nerve-ridden at times. Maybe that's just, I would say it's just with younger age, being young in the league. But this is the season where you separate. I'll ask the question again. Is Mitchell Trubisky the guy? Or is he a guy? That question is still not answered. That question is still not answered, guys. So going into this week against the Broncos, we need Mitchell Trubisky to, retain that swagger, that demeanor, that confidence that we saw in him last season when he was putting up respectable numbers and third in the QB ratings such as QBR. We need that Mitchell Trubisky so we can win some football games. So going into Broncos week, 1 week before we see the Redskins, and 2 weeks before we see the Vikings, we need to go out here confident, strong, and play winning football if you're Mitchell Trubisky and if you're the Chicago Bears offense, because this defense is going to be there for you. I promise you. This defense is going to ball, regardless of the outcome. So in conclusion, man, going up against the Broncos this week, 1 week before our spot against the Redskins and 2 weeks before another division clash against the Vikings, I look for our offense to step up and play Chicago Bears football, man. Mitchell Trubisky has to come out and lead the charge, remind us of that confidence, swagger-filled young man that we had last season throwing football for us, man. MT10, it's time to step up. Matt Nagy, Tariq Cohen, Allen Robinson, continue to do your thing. And this offense has got to turn it around and deliver some points for this defense. This is the Undefeated Bears podcast. Pleasure talking to you this week. We'll be back next week after the match against the Broncos, and we'll talk a little Redskins football coming up next week on Undefeated Bears podcast.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Undefeated Bears podcast. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube for the latest updates. Win, lose, or draw, Bears fan remain undefeated.